Ocampo was born on March 28, 1988 in Mexico City. Itzcoatl Ocampo was the oldest son of two Mexican immigrants who eventually came to Seattle in the Orange County suburb of Yorba Linda, California. After spending the first 12 years of his life in the state, his parents gained American citizenship for both of them and their children. And Itzcoatl, who would go on to graduate from Anaheim Esperanza High School in the summer of 2006. His high school friends would later remember Ocampo as a warm and friendly young man, and it was this demeanor that won him many friends during his education. But something happened during his school years that had a profound effect on Ocampo. The attack on New York's Twin Towers in September of 2001. Following what proved to be one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in world history, accomplice friends noticed a distinct shift in his personality. He became dark and brooding, fostering an intense interest in the politics of the Republican Party, and particularly the foreign policies of then President George W. Bush. It was also around this time that Ocampo became a victim of a rather intense campaign of bullying by what his friends later described as a bunch of rich jocks. Whether or not this affected his decision to join the U.S. Marines is unclear, but we know that as of July 2006, he was stationed at Camp Pendleton and Oceanside, where he was attached to the 15th Regiment of the Medical and Sanitary Battalion. In 2008, Ocampo was deployed to Iraq with the 1st Supply Battalion to Iraq, but it's evident that he didn't see combat during his 8 months in country. His job was to transport water and fuel the combat soldiers deeper in the field. And although he certainly faced all the dangers presented by an act of insurgency, Ocampo was never actually under fire at any point. We also know that at some point during his tour, there was an incident in which Ocampo pointed a loaded weapon at an Allied soldier. Although it's not clear which nationality the soldier was, Ocampo was severely punished for his indiscretion. He was demoted, docked pay, and assigned extra work duties as penance. Despite this worrying episode, Ocampo still received all the appropriate commendations of his tour, including the Iraq Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, and the National Defense Service Medal. His superiors apparently viewed his outbursts as an unfortunate but unavoidable part of serving in an active war zone. Ocampo was stressed he acted out, but he didn't hurt anyone, and he took his punishment like a man. And it seems his later behavior is better explained by an event which occurred back in the States. After returning to Camp Pendleton, Ocampo experienced a traumatic brain injury. When the latch on his 7-ton failed to lock and slammed into the back of his head, he was medically discharged at the worst possible time. Rent as the U.S. was falling into a recession, Ocampo struggled to find work, eventually settling for low-paid work as a landscaper. All the while, his life fell apart around him. He discovered that his father was addicted to drugs, causing Ocampo's mother to divorce him. They also lost the house as a result of this addiction, and the pain this must have caused Itzcoatl is frankly immeasurable. Around July 2010, Ocampo began to show signs of complex PTSD. First noted when he began and exhibit what he might call deviant behavior. A serious factor for the deterioration of his mental state was the death of his close friend Pitino, who died in Afghanistan's Helmand province during combat in the summer of 2010. Following his death, Itzcoatl became depressed and increasingly dependent on alcohol. Over the next 2 years, unable to adapt to a normal life and hold a job. He depended on income from relatives and refused treatment from psychiatrists, insisting he was unqualified to be diagnosed for PTSD because he did not fight in combat. By the end of 2011, his mental state had deteriorated sharply to the point of developing hypochondria and showing signs of clinical delirium. Then, on October 25th of 2011, Ocampo suddenly appeared on the doorstep of his old high school classmate, 24-year-old Adair Herrera. Adair lived with his 53-year-old mother, Raquel, along with his older brother, Juan, and both were present when Ocampo unexpectedly lunged at them, stabbing both Rockhill and Juan more than 30 times. The Herreros' neighbors witnessed the murders, providing police with a description of the offender's appearance and his clothing. But because their Adair no combo were similar in appearance, the grieving Adair was arrested in the shocking display of police negligence. Despite denying any involvements in the deaths of his mother and brother, he was still considered the main suspect when it was revealed that shortly before the crime, he had gotten into some kind of verbal altercation with them, as per a statement from their neighbors. Just short of 2 months later, on the evening of December 21st, Ocampo was loitering about in the parking lot of a shopping center in Bloc Cassia when he suddenly attacked a 53-year-old homeless man named James McGilvery. His bloody execution by stabbing was recorded on CCTV, and the police managed to release a composite photo of the killer in the hopes of cutting accomplice spree short. But a week later, Ocampo committed another murder. This time, the victim was 42-year-old homeless man Lloyd Meadow, who spent most of his time under a bridge crossing the Santa Ana River in Anaheim. Middle Lake McGilvery was found stabbed almost 60 times, as if the killer had entered some kind of frenzy that they'd struggled to come down from. 2 days later, Ocampo killed another homeless man, stabbing 57-year-old Powerless Smith more than 50 times before discarding his body in the parking lot of a public library in Yorba Linda. And by the same time, Ocampo killed for a fourth time. News about the homeless death in Orange County began to spread like wildfire among local and national media outlets. Then, in early January of 2012, several newspapers published a series of articles about the investigation into the killings. One included an article in the Los Angeles Times, in which a reporter interviewed a 64-year-old Vietnam War veteran named John Barry, who spoke extremely negatively about the perpetrator and urged any potential victims to be as careful as they can in order to avoid being the next victim. And Barry's words signed his own death warrant. And as a result, Ocampo traveled all the way over to Anaheim to begin stalking Barry. In the following evening, Belcampo found Barry Nero Carls Jr. in Anaheim. Then, after waiting for the right moment to strike, he attacked and stabbed Barry in front of dozens of witnesses, fleeing on foot after killing him. These witnesses obviously rushed to call 911, and Ocampo was arrested while trying to dispose of his bloody clothing just several hundred meters away from the crime scene. Police confiscated a 7-inch stainless steel blade from him, one that was soaked with John Barry's blood. Homicide detectives then discovered that the murder weapon matched the one in the killings of the 3 other homeless men, and Ocampo was now confirmed to be the Orange County homeless killer. Only later, with the murders of his school friend's mother and brother tied to his maniacal spree, and after learning of his cruelty, Orange County District Attorney Tony Rakakis confirmed that he would seek the death penalty during the upcoming trial. Accomplice trial was scheduled to begin on January 17, 2004. Yet on the evening of November 27, 2013, Ocampo somehow managed to get a hold of the bottle of Ajax that was found dead after having swallowed the entire bottle. It was a coward's way out a way of retaining the dignity that he had denied to so many others in his brief but tumultuous life. Was its code of Ocampo evil, or was he a product of a broken society, suffering in his own personal hell? Who found that killing was his one true way of getting back into system he once had so much faith in? Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
Phoenix Luna grew up in Tokyo's Tochigi Prefecture. He had a difficult upbringing and at one point was forced to live in a youth institution when his father abandoned his family and his mother could not afford to raise him. After graduating middle school, he gained work in the construction industry, but after a few years quit due to personal issues and ended up homeless on the streets of Tokyo. At just 20 years old, he was penniless and impoverished, but being young and good-looking, he managed to find work as a bar host at a joint called Fusion by Youth. For those that don't know, Tokyo's Kabukicho district is home to a number of bars and clubs known as Hatsuto Karubu. These are places where female customers pay for male company, who are known as bar hosts. Male hosts pour drinks for their clients and will often engage in flirtatious conversations. These conversations are generally lighthearted, and hosts tend to have a variety of entertainment skills, ranging from simple magic tricks to the ability to tell engaging stories. A host's age usually ranges from 18 to 27, and they will often take a stage name, usually taken from a favorite manga, film, or historical figure that describes their character or persona, hence why the young man in question is known here as Phoenix Luna, and not by his birth name, which he has kept a closely guarded secret. Men who become hosts are often those who either cannot find a white-collar job or are enticed by the prospect of high earnings through commission. It was these prospects that attracted Luna to the hosting scene, and the job saved him from a life of homelessness and destitution. But it was through his work as a bar host that Luna met a person that would change his life forever, a 21-year-old woman named Yuka Takaoka. Yuka was employed as the manager of a so-called girls' bar, the female equivalent of the kind of place Luna worked at. She worked long hours and found it very difficult to meet men she was actually attracted to, and found herself frequenting host bars since they revolved around a concept she understood all too well. This was how she met Luna, and upon meeting him in October of 2018, she was instantly smitten. Over the next 7 months, she cultivated a kind of relationship with him and became one of his regular customers. Luna made her feel special, often telling her that he liked her and that he wished to be with her. Hosts are generally forbidden from socializing with their clients outside of working hours, but Luna made an exception for Yuka. They often met at Yuka's 5th-floor apartment in Shinjuku Ward, where they shared food and watched movies, and after a few months of doing so, Yuka asked Luna if he would like to pursue an exclusive relationship with her. Luna replied that he would, but was taken aback when one of her conditions for doing so was that he quit hosting and find a regular job. She was adamant that he would have to stop flirting with other women, whether that be in a professional capacity or otherwise. This was something Luna could not adhere to. He enjoyed his work and considered his fellow hosts as a kind of surrogate family. Reluctantly, he was forced to decline Yuka's offer, but told her they could continue to see each other if that was something she wanted. Yuka was heartbroken. She adored Luna and became increasingly depressed as a result of his rejection. This depression morphed into jealousy and thoughts of taking her own life, and eventually, Yuka hatched a plan for the pair to be together forever. On May the 23rd, 2019, Yuka asked Luna to meet her at her apartment to assist with some cleaning work. They agreed to meet at around noon, but due to work commitments, Luna was delayed by around 3 hours. By the time he arrived, he was exhausted and told Yuka that he would like to take a nap before they commenced the cleaning work. Luna took a quick bath and then climbed into bed with Yuka, where he fell asleep in her arms. He awoke a short time later with an intense pain in his stomach. At first, Luna thought he was suffering from stomach cramps after eating bad food, but when he looked down, he saw the bed sheets were soaked with blood. That's when he saw a large kitchen knife buried into his gut, turning to see Yuka standing over him, her eyes wide with feverish anger. Coursing with adrenaline, Luna leapt from the bed and ran from the apartment to escape his obsessive attacker and to seek medical help. But Yuka gave chase. Luna managed to fight her off as they reached the building's elevator, but had lost so much blood by the time he reached the lobby that he collapsed to the floor and passed out. But before he lost consciousness, Luna saw Yuka kneeling over his body. "Please don't kill me," he begged. "I like you." Yuka smiled, and the world went black. Police soon received a call that a man had been stabbed in an apartment complex in Shinjuku. They arrived shortly afterward to find the unconscious Luna with Yuka sitting by his body, covered in his blood and smoking a cigarette. A photograph was taken of this scene, which quickly circulated online, a photograph that is still remarkably easy to obtain via Google image searches. Yuka was quickly arrested, putting up no resistance, and showed absolutely no remorse for her actions. In fact, there is another photograph of Yuka that was taken while she was sitting in the back of the police car after she'd been arrested. A huge, excited smile is etched across her face, which is extremely disturbing given that she had recently almost disemboweled someone she claimed to love so much. When police questioned her motives for the crime, Yuka told them, "Since I loved him so much, I just couldn't help it. I was sad and seeking to die and thought how I would like to go about it," she said. "I thought I would kill him because I thought that was how I could be with him. I thought that expressions such as 'I like you' and 'I'd like to be with you' would become a reality if we both die. I did not want to go anywhere, so I sat down at the outside staircase. I didn't call emergency services because I intended to end my own life after watching him die from the stabbing." In the aftermath of the stabbing, social media users all over the world fixated over her behavior, especially those with an interest in the Japanese concept of yandere, a name used to describe obsessive, jealous female lovers. Those with an interest in the phenomenon shared Yuka's Instagram account, one where she posted images of her dressed as various anime characters, which attracted all kinds of unsavory male attention from those who idolized her good looks and painfully overlooked her murderous psychopathology. Some even said she was too beautiful to be an attempted murder suspect. Luna had lost so much blood in the incident that it took him 5 whole days to regain consciousness in a nearby hospital. Doctors have him a mere 1 in 5 chance at recovery when he had first arrived, but somehow he had beaten the odds and pulled through after a series of surgeries to repair the catastrophic damage done to his internal organs. At first, I had no voice, so speaking was not possible, and I was bedridden, so I couldn't walk alone for a while, Luna said in a statement to journalists. I also couldn't eat after the incident, and I got quite thin. When I thought back to when I was stabbed and considered what I'd do in the future, I was unable to sleep due to anxiety and fear, and for that I received counseling. Yet bizarrely, despite his near-death experience at the hands of Yuka, Luna stated that he did not hold any ill feeling toward her. "I do not hold a grudge. I think there's a reason for her to stab me. It was also thanks to her that I was able to achieve the sales that I did in less than a year since I'd become a host." The incident also had one unexpected result. After Luna arrived at the hospital, police sought to locate one of his blood relatives. "I met my older brother and older sister for the first time in 5 years," he said. "I'll be very happy to stay in touch with them in the future. I think we can agree that the result is a heartwarming, wholesome end to a frankly terrifying ordeal, and that Luna had showed an extraordinary amount of bravery to return to his job as a bar host. But surely, it is only a matter of time before another girl develops an obsession with him, and we can only hope that it doesn't end in the same terrifying, bloody way."
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
This story takes place 2 years ago, when I was living in the same house as my 2 younger sisters and my father. We lived in a neighborhood that wasn't necessarily unsafe, but wasn't the best neighborhood for people to live in. I can recall some neighbors getting arrested for dealing when I was maybe 5, but the story isn't about them. In the summer of 2018, my sisters and I would stay up late into the night, sometimes only going to bed after the sun had risen. I was 17 and my sisters were 15 and 13. My father would go to bed early, as he was a responsible adult. To explain the situation best, I need to describe what my house looked like. It was a 1-story home with 4 doors on the front of my house, 3 of which opened to our living room, and 1 of which opened to my bedroom. Our backyard fence had been knocked down by a storm recently, and we had 2 doors on the back of the house, one that opened to the kitchen, and one that opened to my father's room. One night at around 12:30 a.m., I was doing what I usually did. I was listening to scary stories on my phone as I made art on my iPad. I didn't use earbuds because I've always been paranoid that something might happen while I'm using them. My sisters, who shared a room down the hall from me, were doing whatever they did at night. It didn't really concern me. My father was fast asleep in his room. Now, I don't know about all of you, but I always end up very on edge when I'm listening to scary stories, so I'm hyper-aware of what's going on around me. You can imagine how hard I jumped when I heard a sharp pounding on our front door. 4 hard thuds could be heard throughout the house, and I could hear the front door shake with the strength of each knock. I checked the time, terrified. It was 1 a.m. I held my breath, hoping to God that I'd heard wrong. I really didn't want to think someone was at my front door. At this moment, my middle sister Jen came running to my room, trying to keep her steps silent. She looked at me, eyes wild. "You heard that too, right?" she asked, voice trembling. I swallowed and nodded, heart pounding in my chest. "We need to go wake Dad up," I responded and started towards my father's bedroom. Julia followed diligently behind me. On our way to our dad's room, my youngest sister Ness peeked her head out from her room. She too looked scared. I opened my dad's door and shook him awake, trembling slightly. One of my worst fears is someone breaking into our house. "Dad, someone's at the front door." Even as I said this, I felt sick. "What?" Dad whispered, groggy and not at all happy that we had woken him. "There's someone here," Jen whispered. "I heard it. Someone knocked on the door." I nodded all too eagerly. My dad slowly got out of bed. He knew that my sisters and I always jumped to the worst conclusions whenever anything happened, so he assumed we were doing the same here. I watched silently as he went to the front door, my stomach leaping to my throat. "There's no one out there," he told my sisters and I, absolutely unimpressed as he looked through the blinds. My heart sank a little. I kind of started to doubt myself, but my sisters had heard the knocking too, so I knew I wasn't alone in this. I tried to reason with him before he went back to bed, but he didn't believe us, too scared to really care what we were saying. Dejected but scared, I ended up taking my mattress off my bed and sleeping in my sister's room for the night, taking a baseball bat and lying it next to my mattress. My overactive imagination had me thinking that whoever was at the door was out to kill us, and I knew I had to defend my younger sisters against any danger that dared enter our house. The next day passed just fine. My sisters and I knew we had heard something, and our dad brushed off our attempts to explain it. He thought we were sleep-deprived, or perhaps that a large bug had hit our door. That explanation I had frowned at. It wasn't until 11 p.m. that night, when my father was lounging on one of the couches in the living room, that we heard the pounding again. Only this time it was much more aggressive and directly on the door behind my father. My father let out a loud, frustrated scream and charged toward the front door. I had been standing in the living room when the pounding occurred again, and my sisters had rushed to stand next to me after hearing my father shout. We were all shaken. Our father never yelled like that. I started to cry as my father went to rush outside and confront whoever was out there. I begged him not to go outside in case he were to get hurt. He told my sisters and I to call the cops, and he cursed some more when he realized that whoever had knocked on the door was now gone. My sisters called the cops, and they arrived fairly quickly, talking with my dad about what was going on, claiming that there had been other complaints about this happening, and explaining that they would try their best to find out who was doing this. The police did a search around our house but didn't find anyone, even searching the backyard where I was afraid the perpetrator might be. The police assured us that someone would patrol the neighborhood that night. Once the cops were gone, my dad apologized for not believing us the night before. We said it was okay and left it at that. He locked all of the doors and stayed up later than my sisters and I. I couldn't calm down, so I slept in my sister's room that night as well. Eventually, though, I put this situation behind me. A few months had passed, but not without nightmares and sleep paralysis about the whole ordeal. Most nightmares ended with someone breaking in and hurting my sisters. Other nightmares ended in more brutal ways. I thought nothing more of the whole ordeal. This is until one day I came home from school, and Ness ran up to me, buzzing with energy. She proceeded to tell me that apparently the cops had found out who was knocking on everyone's door about a month or so ago. It was some older guy who lived a few houses down from us. They had gotten him to stop, and I'm not sure if he was given a warning or something. He was a little unstable mentally, and nobody had ever opened their doors for him. Ness then told me that the same guy had been arrested earlier this day. I was shocked. He'd only been knocking on people's doors at odd hours of the night. I asked her why he'd been arrested. He shot and killed 15 people one town over, she responded. I couldn't believe it, but my father later confirmed this story. I'm happy to say that he is in jail and no longer lives in that neighborhood. I haven't done any more looking into his crime other than trying to confirm it for myself the day he was arrested. I am also happy to say that after another recent event where someone tried to break into our house, my father installed a Ring doorbell, the doorbell with the camera, which gave my sisters and I some comfort. I hope this man gets what he deserves, or maybe that he gets the help he needs if he really truly is completely insane. I also hope that the families affected by this man's actions are able to find some form of closure in knowing that he's locked away for what he's done.